And now, Annapolis by R.S. Cotterill and Eloise Somerlatt. The people of Maryland are accustomed to say that they possess, in Annapolis, the only perfect city in the world. For Annapolis has closed her accounts with the world, has balanced her books, and rests, unaltered by the passing of time. This in itself is a quality quite remarkable enough to merit description in these days when greatness is a question of growth and avoirdupois. But Annapolis has many more claims to distinction. It is without doubt more of an old world city than any other in the land. And in the same sense that New Orleans is a city of France, so is Annapolis a city of England. The streets are English, the houses are English, the ideas and traditions are English. Its whole appearance and culture is fairly redolent of the England of the early Hanovers. For it is from that period of English history that Annapolis derives its characteristics rather than the sterner Puritan times when it was founded. Annapolis set out upon its life's career as a protest, being founded by the godly, though sometimes disagreeable Puritans from Virginia. It will be remembered as a matter of history how in 1649 10 Puritan families left the Old Dominion rather than conform to the established church, threaded their way through the Chesapeake, and made a settlement on the Severn, calling it Providence. The history of this infant town has been often written and need not be repeated. How in the Civil War the Providence men overthrew Governor Stone, coming to overwhelm them on their own Severn, and would assuredly have hanged him for the glory of God had not the women have entreated them, and how in 1694 the capital of Maria Terra was removed from Old St. Mary's to this, the more central location. To Annapolis, the coming of the capital was the beginning of glory. To the 40 houses it already boasted, it soon added a state house, and King William himself established a free school to which he gave his own name and a part of his library, some of which books are today in St. John's College. A brick church was put up too, the first of its kind in Maryland. At the same time, it experienced a change of name and was dubbed Anne Arundel's Town, having already lived through a Providence, a Proctor's, a townland at the Severn, a town at Proctor's, and most recently, a townland at the Severn where the town was formerly. Anne Arundel's Town, after 1 year, gave way to the port of Annapolis, and finally, in 1708, good Queen Anne gave it a charter and named it the City of Annapolis, which name it has retained to this good day. How Annapolis looked to a not impartial observer may be gathered from a poem written by one Eden Cook at London about this time. A city situate in a plain, where scarce a house will keep out rain. The buildings framed with cypress rare resemble much our Southwark fair, but strangers there will scarcely meet with marketplace, exchange, or street. St. Mary's once was in repute, now here the judges try the suit, and lawyers twice a year dispute as off the bench most gravely meet. Some to get drunk, and some to eat, a swinging share of country treat. But as for justice right or wrong, not one among the numerous throng knows what it means. From the Hanoverian period of the Georges, Annapolis took its beginning. As Caesar would say, the city today is but a vast reminder of the time. It was then, as now, a city set on a hill with the great State House in the center and the streets radiating from it down the slope in all directions like the spokes of a wheel from the hub. More than one writer has shrewdly guessed that L'Enfant took Annapolis as his mode when he made his plans for Washington. Both the names and the character of these streets bespeak their origin. There is a Prince George Street and a King George Street, and Hanover Street is commemorated the entire Hanoverian dynasty apparently. There is a Duke of York Street and a Duke of Gloucester Street, which must have been named in honor of Richard III himself. So winding and devious and altogether vain it is. He who is seeking for a modern city had better leave Annapolis out of his pilgrimage. Here are to be found, certainly, the narrowest and crookedest streets on the continent, so narrow that as the pilgrim walks along them, carefully hugging the walls to escape collision, he can almost imagine himself back in a medieval city, and see the sturdy burghers sitting in their doorways and conversing in whispers with one another on the gossip of the day. And many a street he shall find which sets out boldly for the horizon, falters, doubles on its track, and after standing gravely on its head, returns serenely to the starting point in a proud consciousness of duty well performed. But what would you? Shall we wish that the way shall be broad and the path straight, when we have the beauty of the old, old streets ever with us? And along these streets, what a succession of quaint, beautiful old-world houses do we have. Here every house is a law unto itself, planting itself wheresoever it listeth, whether that be squarely on the street or deep back on the lawn, where it is half hid by the intervening trees. In Annapolis, at least, we have no parallelogrammatic infringement of individual eccentricity. Modern houses there are, of course, and fine ones aplenty. But the spirit of the town abides in its dark, brick, time-stained houses, hip-roofed and broad-porched, drilling along the highway, with that delightful irregularity which one likes so much in rural towns, whose streets are green lanes rather than dusty roads. Such were the houses in the time of King George I, and such these are today. In colonial Maryland, Annapolis was the metropolis, as well as the capital. The ruling class here was the gentry, a landed aristocracy who lived in the old town and made it renowned for its luxury and the grace of its social life. They were proud of their English ancestry and traditions, and somewhat inclined to look down on the parvenus farther inland on the western shore. Much history was made here. The first newspaper in America issued its first number here, the Maryland Gazette. One of the first theaters in America was erected here, and Annapolis could boast in colonial days of the finest racetrack in the colonies. Here came Braddock and Governor Dinwiddie to land one memorable spring day, and tarried for a council with Shirley, Delancey, and Morris over plans for an ill-fated expedition. And when the time came, the gentry of Annapolis showed themselves vigorous Americans. At the time of the Stamp Act, Mr. Hood made himself obnoxious by his importations of stamps, whereupon the assertors of British-American privileges made an effigy of him and hauled it around town to the accompaniment of tolling bells until they reached the hill. Here they tied it to a whipping post, flogged it, put it in a pillory, hanged it by the neck, and finally set fire to a barrel of tar beneath it and sent it up in flames. No wonder if Mr. Hood began to think himself unpopular in Annapolis. It has become a part of our history how the Peggy Stewart was burnt at the time of the tea tax trouble. Her owner had brought over tea and had paid the duty on it. The citizens, in gentle token of disapproval, gathered before the house of the owner, and being liberal-minded men, gave him his choice of burning the ship or being hanged. They pointed the moral, if they did not adorn the tale, by erecting a gallows before his door whereupon he might gaze and learn wisdom. He learned. As Baltimore rose to prominence, the glory of Annapolis departed in the ways of trade. After the Revolution, it ceased to grow and became what it is today, a shrine. If only houses and streets and trees had memories and could talk. Standing in watchful guard over the State House is an antique cannon that once did duty on the Ark and Dove as it came across the Atlantic on its first trip. This may be considered the lineal descendant of the bulldog that used to roam at large around the Capitol in the days of Governor Eden. In the State House itself stood George Washington at one time and surrendered his commission as commander-in-chief. A little later, the Annapolis Convention held its meetings here. The old Carvel House, famous in history and in Churchill's novel, still stands in unimpaired dignity. Here is to be found the little shop where Washington was shaved by old Caton. The Peggy Stewart House still stands on its foundation and unaltered all, as does the mansion house of Charles Carroll of Carrollton. Down on the corner of the St. John's campus is to be seen the ancient tulip tree under whose spreading branches a treaty was made with the irate Susquehannocks early in the 17th century, the oldest inhabitant of Annapolis, and old when Columbus came to land. Annapolis, then, is a town of the long ago. It is also an aristocratic town. It was and is, but even its aristocracy has an atmosphere of the long ago. It is the kind of aristocracy which, with a profound bow, throws open its massive wooden doors for you at the summons of a brass knocker. And do not imagine that the brass knocker is a modern imitation. It is the same one that sounded generations gone when great-great-grandfathers stood, cocked hat in hand, at the entrance of great-great-grandmother's home. And though a derby labeled Stetson may have replaced the old-time hat in the hands of the young man who stands at the entrance today, yet the atmosphere lingers, and we almost expect the young man to be greeted with a powdered wig and a curtsy. Hospitality and courtesy there was in abundance in those old homes, dispensed by men bravely clad in scarlet waistcoats and knee breeches with sword at side, and gentle ladies in soft gray silks and rustling black satin. Bobbing servitors secured the comforts of the guests, and massive mahogany gave glimpses of a glory even then passing. And though the old fashions have changed and the black servants have become free, the visitor in Annapolis today will find the hospitality still there, and the courtesy abides. It would be little less than treason to Annapolis to picture its antiquity and fail to mention that it is in one respect the most modern place in the land. To the ancient grace of Annapolis, the Naval Academy adds the needed touch of strength. When George Bancroft placed it here in 1845, Annapolis still had dreams of metropolitan glories. Now the old town dreams in memories. But the Academy grows younger day by day. Just now, it is a salient in our first line of defense, for the masters of our Navy come from here. We can easily imagine how puzzled must be the genius of the old town at the bustle and confusion prevailing there, but not disapproval, for Annapolis, for all her repos, has fought her battles in times past and sent her citizens to war as she does now. And right across from the Academy is the St. John's College, whose students have trained for war for a century and more. What storm spots are there in the otherwise peaceful scene? But what is the strength of words? Volumes have been written about Annapolis, and more will be written. But Annapolis is not to be read about or even talked about. It must be felt. And he who goes thither a pilgriming would do well to end his pilgrimage with the sea. Annapolis by the sea. Our fathers spoke of it as though it were wedded to the waters, and indeed this is a part of the glory of it. The city rises apparently out of the depths, and appears literally a precious stone set in a silver sea. It is worth a journey across the continent to stand at the sea's edge and look out over the harbor, which, though smaller than some, surely is the most beautiful one in the world. It is a beauty of peace and quiet and rest. Cares slip from you as you look at it. Pain and unrest leave the troubled spirit. Heart's ease is there. And as you stand on the wharf and look out into the haze, the years depart, and you think yourself back in the olden time, watching the ships from a far country glide in at your feet if you stand on the beach. Here is a truculent man of war with menacing guns, and close beside it a merchant ship to which the slaves are carrying tobacco for transport across the seas. Best of all, here comes a ship laden with passengers, rejoicing over her approach to the promised land. And as you look, the sun breaks through the haze, the vision fades, and you find yourself in everyday Annapolis, but never more an ordinary city to you, but a sacred place.